we could get started and make sure we don't do any new business before CJ joins.
I'm in favor of that. Everybody want to go on?
Fine.
We good?
Yep.
I think so.
Yeah.
Okay. So everybody has a copy of the agenda, correct?
Yes.
We already
Yes.
covered
Yeah.
that. Okay, so we're a little late, but I'd like to call us to order at 6:44. And for sake of the roll call, how about you just, I'll start at the top. Stan Gano, I'm here.
Joyce
Nishina,
Bottenberg.
I'm sorry,
And I just said my name, Joyce Bottenberg.
Joyce is here. Terry,
Terry Hall is here.
thank you.
Nushina Mir is here.
Thank you.
Tom
I'll
Ehlers
get
is
you
here.
next on the screen. Thanks.
Yep.
Jody Nishioka is here.
Jody, I would have butchered your last name as long as we've been together. So everybody's present. CJ is getting
Okay,
back
I've just
online.
been able to dial in on my landline.
Great.
And
So CJ is also present. So now I would like to proceed and do the Pledge of Allegiance. Mike, can you raise the flag?
1 second.
Who's there?
there you go.
I got to share.
Oh, wow.
Mhm.
Hold on.
I'm going to stand up. Will you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
Allegiance
of the United States of
to the United
America,
States of America,
to the republic
to the
which it
republic
stands,
for which it
one
stands,
nation,
one
under
nation,
God,
under God,
indivisible, liberty
indivisible,
and justice.
liberty
for all.
and justice for all.
Thank you. So I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
This is Jody. I actually would like to add something to the agenda. Can you hear me?
Okay,
You can hear me?
yes,
It sounded like a little
go
feedback
ahead,
there.
Jody.
I'd like to
Go
just
ahead, Jody.
add an acknowledgement of what has been going on, particularly around Black Lives Matter movement, and just have a discussion about that as a commission. Because I do think at some level it impacts us.
I second that, and I'll also appreciate an update on the proposal that was discussed with the City Council on February 11th, because I think we didn't close the loop on it. We haven't had meetings since then, and I don't know whether everyone feels that we have closed the loop on it.
Okay, can we just add those right after the approval of the minutes?
Yes, that would be great.
Can we limit discussion on them to like 10, 15 minutes maybe?
I don't know. I don't know how long it's going to take. I think that I know that we have a lot on our agenda, but I don't know. I don't know what our conversation is going to be. So I don't know if I want to limit it at this stage.
Okay,
And can I make a suggestion that we actually have that discussion possibly after Rita does her new business, because I believe she may have touched on that. She's going to touch on that. And also it would allow any public comment to unfold prior to our discussion.
Oh,
Because that
maybe.
feels a
is that our,
little
Sure.
like,
Why don't we do public comment first? Yeah, that makes sense.
okay,
okay, so we'll do it under new business?
that was my suggestion.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Maybe it's the new number 2. It's slotted in after Rita's, if that's comfortable for everybody.
Okay, and then September's issue? Nashina?
Yes. What I was mentioning was just I'll appreciate an update, maybe Stan from you as the chair, on the proposal that was discussed with the City Council on February 11th. Because I don't think we really closed the loop on it. We haven't had meetings since then.
And that
correct?
was the 150, the proposal we made, Nishina?
Yeah,
Okay. And I know, yeah. Rita, I think can help us with that too.
Yeah, I think Rita, you're stuck doing the update on that. I see a little head shake, so that works. So we want to do that again after public comment, correct? So Jody, you'll be up first, and then Rita, or excuse me, Jody's issue will come up first, Rita. Do your head like that, Rita.
Stan, I was suggesting that we hear from Rita first because I think she may touch on this a little. And then that might be a nice lead into Jody's topic.
Okay. Does that work with everybody, those changes?
Sure.
yes.
Okay. I don't think I need a motion to accept the changes, right?
Motion to accept is amended.
Oh, thank you, Joyce.
I second that
All in
motion.
favor? Good.
Aye.
So
Aye.
that's the motion for the change. All in favor of the change?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. CJ, are you still there?
I'm still here. Can you hear
Okay.
me?
I can, thank you. All right. Approval of the minutes from the last meeting, February 12th. Has everybody had a chance to review them?
Yes.
Entertain, does anybody have any changes first?
No, motion to accept.
So
I have a
moved.
motion from Joyce. Second from Tom. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Great. That one passed. Mike. Michael there,
Yes, sir.
which is Rita. Are you handling the public comment session?
Yeah, let me kick it off for us here. So I see that we have, I believe, one or two people that have called in to provide public comment this evening. If you could just unmute yourself and state your name and that you would like to provide public comment, then we can get a list of commenters going. So if you could please do that now.
Hi, my name is Genesis Garcia Toet.
Thank you, Genesis. Is there anybody else that would like to provide public comment? Okay, it looks like we just have one this evening. Genesis, you have 3 minutes to provide public comment. You may begin at any moment.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. I am pleased to see you all back. My name is Genesis Garcia Toet, and I think that this is a very important commission and that you all have a responsibility during this time. I recently attended a protest to support the Black Lives Matter movement here in Sammamish that was put together by a teenager who did it because she said, if I don't do it, then who will? Although I don't think you should be the ones to lead the protest, I do believe you should be leading on something. At the protest, I saw people of all ages. I saw family members. I saw people who wanted to show their support for Black lives. I recently emailed all of you about an idea I had about putting together a virtual panel. And I also wanted to thank Rita for taking time out of her schedule to speak to me. I wanted to make sure that I put my ask on the record for you all and to do my part as a resident of Sammamish and engage my community. I don't know what this panel should look like, but I do think we need to hear from Black Lives in Sammamish, King County organizations, and others. I do have experience with organizing and would love to help in any way that would be helpful. I just believe that right now, I know that we need action from our city, and we need to have a chance to hear from the King County Sheriff, our elected leaders, Black youth, community organizations, and others. All across the world, people are standing up for Black lives, and I think that Sammamish should be no exception. And I really do think that this is a time for all of us to be proactive. So I just wanted to say that, and thank you all for listening to me tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Genesis.
Chair, that is all for public comment.
Okay, thank you. So now under new business, our presenter is Rita. You're on.
Some jazz hands. Hi, everyone. It's so nice to see you all. Mike and I have missed you all. We really have, and I hope you are all keeping well and you and yours healthy and good, and you're not all going stir crazy being at home. So I just wanted to, give you a very broad update as to what's been happening. We haven't met in over 3 months, and obviously a lot's happened since then. So I'm going to give you an update as to what I felt were the pertinent points that would maybe be of interest to you guys. And if there are points that I haven't covered, please, feel free to ask me questions, and so you can get a better idea of what's happening with human services within the city. So obviously things are very different now with all things COVID, and this has impacted nonprofit providers across the area and region as well as the city. I've made sure to connect with nonprofits, but particularly those providers that serve Sammamish residents in particular. Currently now, it's too early to see trends. We know the demand for services is increasing, but our Q1 reporting only went to the end of March. And so I feel like Q2 reporting, which will cover April, May, and June, that will give us a clearer picture as to what we're seeing in the way of demand for services. So we should have that by mid-July, some good data points for you guys to look at and reflect on. So I just want to, talk about a few organizations in particular. So the first one is St. Vincent de Paul. And as you know, we fund them, and they also provide emergency assistance for evictions, utilities, and basic needs. And they've been impacted because 90% of their funds come from parishioners at Mass. And obviously now with services and churches and places of worship not meeting, they've obviously been impacted there. Surprisingly, financial assistance has gone down 35% compared to the same time last year. This may seem puzzling at first, but they're not unique in this decline. The federal stimulus payments, the eviction moratoriums, and unemployment and benefits have kind of contributed to helping households avoid crisis. However, throughout this all, debt is continuing to mount. And so during this time, experts both locally and nationally are predicting an eviction tsunami coming when all those benefits and the moratorium lifts. Moving on to the food bank. So Issachar Food and Clothing Bank has seen a 25% increase in new clients requesting food. They're offering food pickup through a drive-through system, and they offer 2 weeks of pre-packed food. And so Issachar Food and Clothing Bank only serves the south side of Sammamish, and then the north side of Sammamish is served by HopeLink. And they are not tracking details as to who or how many they're serving. They're just trying to reduce the chances of transmission, and they're trying to speed up the process. Issachar Food and Clothing Bank was the only provider delivering emergency food to residents in Sammamish, and they were only serving the south side, but they have very kindly agreed to serve the whole of Sammamish. So currently now, Issachar Food and Clothing Bank is providing food donation or food drop-offs to households that are not able to go to the food bank. So either they're immunocompromised, they're seniors, they're not able to go. So that's very nice of them to provide that service. And also the picture of who's coming to food banks is changing. And anecdotally, we're hearing even the cars that are coming by are looking different to the ones that were coming by a year ago. So we know that more and more people are going for services. Eastside Friends of Seniors, they've established a phone buddy program to address social isolation. And they're also developing a protocol because even though they're getting on the phone, they realize now seniors need that social interaction. So they're trying to develop protocol for social distancing visits so seniors can have face-to-face connection. The Sammamish Senior Center has found innovative ways of connecting, and they pivoted to virtual programming to deal with shelter in place and to reduce the feeling of isolation, from online book club to Zumba classes. LifeWire, they're the main domestic violence agency that we fund here on the East Side, and they reported domestic violence survivors are worried about the loss of income and the ramification of social isolation. There's increased tension and violence in the home as survivors and families are forced into extended contact with abusers. And interestingly, there's been a big decline in the number of reported cases in May compared to this time, May of this year compared to last year. And the pandemic and the economic fallout make it harder for those who are experiencing DV to escape their abusers. So, you know, even though that number's gone down, it doesn't mean it's not happening. It's just that people are just not able to go and reach out for help. So LifeWire are predicting that as social distancing is starting to loosen, they expect to see a big increase in demand for services. And then our teens, they're experiencing stress, isolation, and anxiety. These past weeks in particular have been particularly hard for them with online schooling, the end of the school year coming up, and the concern for Mr. George Floyd's death and how they see racism showing up in their community. There's lots of processing for people of color who have experienced racism in the past and currently. And as you recall, the Teen Mental Health RFP earlier this year awarded 3 providers with funds. I'm happy to say, and I know that we communicated this with you, CrossPath Counselor started in April and is seeing clients with a packed schedule. IAWW was also awarded funds, and they found innovative ways to connect with youth in Sammamish. So they've moved their programming and outreach activities online. So they've served 119 individuals with programming such as weekly check-ins, a youth support group, a parent support group, and both of those are moderated by a South Asian counselor, and webinars on such things as managing stress and anxiety. Crisis Connections was the 3rd organization that the Teen Mental Health RFP funded. And they, as you might recall, are going to try and do work in schools, and obviously they've not been able to do that. They're hopeful to be in schools in the fall, offering online training modules, as well as in-person training if able. So Crisis Connections has not been able to fulfill any service units as yet. They're very hopeful that they'll be able to, you know, get those service units in September when school starts. The City Council expressed a desire to provide extra funding to provide help to the community during this time of the pandemic. And there was $21,500 of unspent human services funds. So that was from last year, where we didn't give these providers, certain providers, all their funds because they didn't provide service units or for other reasons. Actually, it was just because they didn't provide service units. So we had that $21,500 leftover funds, and then council matched that to allocate $43,000 to 4 providers for emergency COVID funding. And those 4 providers that benefited were St. Vincent de Paul, Eastside Friends of Seniors, Issachar Food and Clothing Bank, and HopeLink. So 2 organizations that were providing food to the city, 1 providing emergency financial assistance, and then Eastside Friends of Seniors for the senior population. So let's see. So we know that this is a first touch for council, and they're really trying to take a phased approach to funding. And so they want to allocate funding over time, and they want to also take in consideration other funding sources. So, you know, I know initially like Seattle Foundation or King County have been providing extra funding. So they really want to be mindful of where they put their money, and they really, I sense they want to look and see where those gaps are. So they requested monthly human service updates, and so I'm providing those every month, so they're apprised of the situation and just how it's changing going over time. So we know that the human service landscape is changing, with Governor Inslee today reporting that unemployment claims are coming in at 10 times the rate the system was diagnosed for. So, we know things are changing. And so none of us can predict what that's going to look like. And then finally, many members of our community exercised their First Amendment rights on June the 4th and stood to stand up for racial justice and police brutality. And this was led by high school students, and over 500 residents participated. And it was a very peaceful protest, and it ran very well. So that's the end of my report. I know I haven't covered everything, and I'm happy to answer other questions or anything, any comments, any questions you may have.
Joyce, hasn't the Sammamish Rotary also provided some funds? I didn't hear her mention that.
Rita has already provided that for the council, but of the $110,000 that Rotary has in its special fund for COVID-19 response, we have to date allocated $45,989.
So that adds into all the numbers you already talked about there.
Yeah, it's in Rita's regular quarterly update, monthly updates to the council.
Thank you.
Christina, did that answer your funding question?
Rita, do you have all those things you reported? Do you have that written that you could email that to us?
Of course, I can do that.
I mean, not now, but when you get back to work. Okay, thank you.
Did that answer the funding question? Kushina?
I think, I don't know, I mean, Rita, did you specifically address the?
Yeah, Nishida, were you referring to the Teen Mental Health RFP that we had, those three organizations? Yes. So they were the three organizations: Crisis Connections, India Association of Western Washington, and Cross Path Counseling. And so we just went over that in the report. We are going to be expecting first quarter reporting at the end of this month or sometime later on this month. So at the next meeting, I can kind of give you guys the idea of service units. But as I said, Cross Path, they're underway. There's a counselor in there, fully loaded and scheduled. IAWW has been able to do a lot of stuff virtually, and then Crisis Connection is the one organization that hasn't been able to get into schools, so we're going to have to wait and see on that. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Jody?
Yeah. Am I on? Nope, I'm still. You guys can hear me. Yeah, I just felt like it was appropriate for us to at least, at minimum, acknowledge what is happening around our communities throughout this Washington, here in Sammamish, on the east side, in Washington State, in Seattle, and across the country and the world around Black Lives Matter. I appreciate the public comment that we had earlier. It's a moment in time that I think is really significant and quite powerful at what has been going on, but also incredibly painful for particularly the Black community, and we have Black residents in our own community as well. And I just think it's really important to acknowledge, to not just go on like business as usual.
Yes, absolutely.
And so I did want to just raise it for us to acknowledge and then to think about and reflect on what is there something as a commission that we want to do or say with respect to what is going on. I think we can think about the public comment earlier, what Genesis said, or something else. But I do think it's really important for us as a commission to at least acknowledge what's going on, to discuss potentially what could our role be to bring about change and address the racial inequities that is happening across our country, and look inward. I mean, I've spent the last 2 weeks thinking about this a lot, pretty much all day, every day. And I think that, at least for me, I'm thinking about what can myself and my organization do externally. What kind of actions can we do? What can I do externally in solidarity with other organizations or supporting Black businesses or whatever it is. And similarly for my organization, we're thinking about what kind of action can we do to help to support the movement, to bring about racial equity change. And then internally, I'm looking internally to myself about looking at my own privilege, my own bias, doing some reading and studying and education, further education about all of the issues to deepen my understanding so that I can be a better citizen and ally to our Black community members. So it's just an example of what I'm thinking about doing myself, or what I am doing myself. But I do think that the commission, as a human services commission, I mean, this affects in so many ways, in many, many ways, the work that we do and our community. So I will start it out with that and just open to hearing what folks, if people just want to share even what their feelings are. I think it's just a moment where we have to support each other. This is a really painful time. And in some ways hopeful, but painful as well. And so I want to create that space for us.
I mean, I was wondering whether the providers we work with can do something in schools to create more awareness about this issue, because I have 2 teenagers and in the Issaquah School District, and I've heard well before this many times from them how often the N-word is used very casually, you know, among students. And like, I often hear about these incidents, and it always used to concern me, and now it has just brought it front and center for me, because, you know, if we have young people who don't understand these issues, or are not sensitive about communicating about these issues, then that does not bode well for the future. So, one thing that I have wondered about is, what can we do in our schools?
Thank you, Nishina. Is there anything other folks want to add?
Well, I would jump in and first of all, Jody, thank you for bringing this up. Your comments are just beautifully stated, and I think we all are sitting here nodding our heads along with you. And Nishina, thank you for building on that. I find myself wondering what, in addition to us as an entity, the Human Services Commission of the City of Sammamish, is there an option or a possibility of making a statement of some sort? I know the city made one, so itself was strong. But is there anything we can provide counsel to the city council from our perspective? Like, for instance, and this is not comparing the two, but I know in my own experience, when the issue of sexual harassment was starting to be acknowledged, sensitivity training and learning around that was powerful for anyone who went through it. So as a commission, do we believe we would want to signal to the council that we would like to ensure, anyone associated with the city goes through appropriate training and learning in that way? I don't know if programs are out there like that, but if we're trying to be a little bit of a good counsel to the council, that's just what comes to mind. There may be others, I'm sure, but what advice can we provide them that would help further this? I don't know if that resonates with anyone.
Thanks, Tom. I think that's really thoughtful.
Well, I appreciate, everybody being involved and everything. And with the incident that happened, it's not just a single incident. It's happened many times. There are bad people out there, and there's bad police officers, and we've got to fix. But I think it's bigger than just police officers. I think it's a cultural thing that we have to take a look at. And it's not just it's made me reflect that it's not just the Black community that's suffering. I've seen rude remarks in the Asian community over the virus. I've seen remarks made to people who, are from the Middle East, India specifically. And I think as a community, what I'm doing is I'm taking the extra time out to talk to people, to say hi to the neighbor who isn't a white guy or a white woman like me. I think it's important to learn about other cultures and learn about your community and see what people are going through and see what you can do to reach out and help. I've said before, I have a Chinese couple that live next door who speak very little English. I actually downloaded the translator on my cell phone so I could communicate better with them. And just, what do you need? What can I help you with? But the racism that goes on in all communities is terrible. But right now it's came to light for the Black community, especially with the incident with Mr. Floyd. So I think we all need to take a time out and honestly take a little bit of time to get to know your neighbor. I do like the idea of coming up with something and some wording for the council and for the city to let them know that we do support the Black Lives Matter movement. As far as the protest goes, it's too bad that it got hijacked by some people who were locked up with coronavirus too long. But what do you guys think about coming up with some wording, some letter? Any feedback on that?
Can we identify sensitivity training? Remember, we've had done a mental first aid. Is there a way of being able to support something that already exists?
Well, I have some thoughts on a bunch of that, but I don't want to monopolize. I'm willing to answer some of those questions from my own perspective, but wondering if there's other folks who want to say anything else.
Terry, we can't hear you.
Nope.
Terry, we still can't hear you.
I see your lips are moving.
You could write it down and hold it to the screen.
Yeah, I've seen that happen before.
Help.
Should say an orange button there.
Weird, because it was working for him before.
Yeah. You see the button with the microphone on it?
Right in the, for me, it's in the middle.
He does see it. He's just saying it's not working.
So it's not turning green for you.
Mike, you think you can call him and maybe get him? Can you maybe call us on the phone? Do you have the link to call us on the phone? Because that's probably what also happened to CJ.
It is
Looks
what
like
happens.
Commissioner Hall's microphone was working earlier, and then he dropped off for a minute and rejoined. And I see that his mic is turned on, but we can't hear any audio coming from it. So there is an option to join via phone. If Terry, I can send you the details to call in by phone and use that as your microphone in case you can't get your computer's microphone to get working.
All right.
Did we hear him?
Is,
No, that's Stan. Okay.
no, that was me. He's gonna call in. Rita, is there any known sensitivity training that the city already contracts with?
I beg your pardon, can you repeat that, Stan?
Is there any known sensitivity training that the city already contracts with to provide?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
And if I can just add, I think we really need, I think it's not real.
Yeah.
I don't really know what sensitivity training is. I'm not sure if you're talking about are you talking about sensitivity with respect to race? I think Joyce used the term. So are you talking about anti-racist training, Joyce and Stan?
Building awareness, what can we do to better the situation for ourselves and for our community and the world? That's all.
Yeah, I mean, we've been doing equity trainings. Sarah, I think that's a step for us as a commission, for particularly in our work in giving out money. I'm not sure if we're talking about making a recommendation to the council about all employees around. I'm not really sure what the parameters are. I think we can think about equity training for race equity training specifically for city staff. And
That's where I was going.
is that where
Jody,
you were
that.
going? I mean, we've used Sarah Tran. There are other. I have a list of race equity trainers. So if that's what we're looking for, I think that could be helpful, particularly for the council. I think that they could use that kind of training, but it's more than just one training, right? Like we all had one training. We all thought it was great. Hopefully it'll affect how we will do our grant making. But to really create change, I think it's more than a training. And with respect to a statement, although I think a statement is good, I think silence is complicity. So it is nice to take a stand and make a statement. But I would like to see some kind of action, some kind of activity that we are doing to contribute to, change. And maybe it's just looking at our work and continuing our work around looking at our own bias and our own and learning more about equity so that we can do our job well. But maybe it's doing some advocacy to the council and to the mayor around our own police department. I mean, I don't think we've had thankfully we haven't seen any incidences of brutality, and we don't have a whole lot of Black residents to profile, and we don't have a lot of I don't know what kind of calls they get called out on, but it would be interesting to maybe even look at their budget to see, how much are they spending on violence and force versus community policing, and things like that. I don't know. These are just some things off the top of my head that honestly I don't have proposals prepared. But I would like to see some kind of active engagement around this issue, more than just a statement. But a statement's a good place to start.
So I would think, me personally, I'm going to sit down and make a list of things that I think we need to address or address to the council, and maybe things that need to be looked at to ensure we do have equity, that we're trying to remove some of our biases. Can everybody do something like that and
Come
use
back.
Rita as a central point and then come back with a summary kind of thing?
I mean, one thing we should consider, Stan, I think if it's possible to consider more systemic solutions, that would be better than, just or one-time events. Could also look at, our own grant making practices, or we could look in the field for some examples of how one can become more equitable in grant making practices, so that in the long run we are helping the communities that are really underserved. So that's one way of addressing things in more systemic way.
Well, I'm hearing a lot of feedback. Not sure what that is. There we go.
Well, I like-
I really like. I just wanted to say that I'm reflecting as we're talking about this of what our public comment Genesis said about hearing from Black folks in our own community, and I worry about that because it's really not their role. We shouldn't be burdening Black folks, particularly at this time, to educate us. But at the same time, it's possible that potentially we could compensate organizations that are Black led, like Black Lives Matter, Seattle, King County, or an organization like that, to potentially come to one of our meetings and share with us what is going on, what they're seeing on the ground. Maybe they have some data points about what's happening on this side, not in Seattle, but in East King County, and also like giving us ideas on how we can support them. However, if we do ask organizations to come out and spend the time, particularly in this time when they're all incredibly busy, I don't know if they have the time. But if they did, that I would want to compensate them, and I would like that to come out of the city budget. And I know that we haven't done that for other organizations that we've asked to come, but it is a big ask to ask for Black folks and Black organizations to educate us, non-Black folks. It's a burden on them, and it's work that we should be doing on our own, and it's our responsibility to do that. And so if we do something like that, would like to compensate them for their time.
Jody, let me build on that real quick. And so I did join the protest at the Commons there a week or so ago. Is remarkable. And to me, I literally keep thinking about it and turning it over my head because it truly was youth led. Like that sometimes is a cliche. This really, really was and is. And I find myself wondering as a commission, is there an outreach opportunity to get more youth talking with us and helping us and bringing their voice in? There have been times where we've even said, should we have youth on this commission? There's pros and cons there. But I think one avenue would be out to either those leaders or others to just have a conversation like this and see where it goes, because there are differences in generational thinking as well. And it's remarkable what actually has happened. And I think we should avail ourselves of that.
Yeah, I do. I agree. I think the youth are really stepping up in this moment. And so in many communities, in our community and in other communities as well. So yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Anybody else? Any more input? CJ, are you still there?
I'm still listening.
Okay, do you have any input on this conversation?
I do not at this time.
Okay, thank you. And
I had
it
a
looks like we
comment.
lost. Go ahead.
Stan, I had a comment on the first, just a quick question, but I don't want to derail this particular, the other, which is the need in the community more broadly on human services. So I didn't want to move into the next business without making that, but I don't want to curtail this particular discussion.
I want to make sure that we also stay sensitive to all ethnic groups as well as races who are experiencing prejudice and bias out there as well. I mean, right now the Black community has come to our attention, but I see so much racism and biasness going on, not so much in our community, individual incidents in our community, but as a whole. Do other people feel that way or not?
I'm sorry. I do think that there has been, particularly in light of COVID, for sure, the Asian community. I think that, I think Black folks have carried the weight of the racial injustice in our country more than others, more than any other group. And although I do feel that there's lots of anti-Asian sentiment and other types of isms, I too think that the Black community has carried the biggest burden. And and when it comes to police brutality, there really hasn't been other groups that have experienced the type of killings and death at by the police that in any other group. And so I worry that, Stan, although I totally agree with you, and I that there's lots of racism against many groups, and I've heard a bunch around Asians, and when COVID first broke out, the International District was having lots of issues, and I don't want to minimize that, but at the same time, I'm just in this moment just really feeling that we have to see the systemic problem, the anti-Black problem that we have in our country, and that recognize and acknowledge that they have really carried the burden of racism in our country. And I mean, it's just been systematic. I mean, we just keep seeing it over and over and over again. So that's something that I just don't want to, by focusing on other groups, I don't want to acknowledge other groups, but at the same time, I don't want the acknowledgement of other groups to take away from the weight and the depth of racism and the impact on the Black community. I just don't want to, and as an Asian person, I'm being particularly sensitive and sensitive to this because I know that I carry a lot of privilege that Black folks don't have.
Mm-hmm.
And that I benefit from a lot of the systemic racism in our country and in many systems. I benefit from it as well, that Black folks can't benefit from. And so I'm trying to be a good ally to the Black community and recognize that privilege and name it, and want to dismantle that as well. A system that favors me over Black folks. You know, one of the quotes that has been coming up over and over, I wish I have it written down on my computer, is, you know, if you're coming to me to help me, then walk away. But if you're coming to me because your liberation is bound with mine, then join me. And I'm paraphrasing it. It's not exactly, it's from an Aboriginal activist. And I feel that that's really true. If there's no liberation for all of us, if other people are still being put down. And as an Asian person, a person of color who's not white, I definitely my community definitely experiences a lot of racism, but we also benefit from this system that we're in, and the Black have really carried the burden. So that's just.
I can appreciate that. So do we all want to work on a list and put it together and come up with some ideas on how we can take a step forward on fixing things, what we can do?
I think that's a good plan.
All right.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you. Does anybody else have anything on this? Thank you. Rita, is it you or Mike who's going to be up on our presentation on the services program?
Hey, Stan, can I do a quick summary? We are in an unusual situation where we have, you know, racial injustice right in front of us on the heels of COVID-19 and all of that. So in my mind, a statement I want to just share with the group is, the question in my mind is, how do we really know what the need in our community is broadly relative to the virus and COVID-19? And how do we know that people even know where to get help? To me, it's a terrible sign that domestic violence reports are down. There's no reason to think they're down. In fact, almost certainly they're up. I've also read child abuse reports are down because teachers aren't seeing what's happening. And so a question that I just want to put out there as a commission is, how do we know what the true need in our community is? It's nice that the council moved forward with a small, relatively speaking, contribution, but in my mind, and now kind of mirroring some discussion we had in the food bank board meeting last night, what I want to say is get ready, because there's much more coming our way. And the question is, how do we know what that need is? We don't have to reinvent. We can work with people who know how to get help. My great concern, though, is that people who are under duress are either too afraid or don't have the mechanisms to reach out and get help. And I actually don't think as a city, we have done enough to actually make that opportunity heard, or even to say what it is we need. I think it's an ongoing discussion. This is not going to be done tomorrow. The 43K is a nice start. It's not big enough, in my opinion, anywhere close. But we have to be more informed, and we need to know what the need is. I don't know if that can, and I'm not pointing fingers here at all. We're all trying to figure it out. But I don't know if that resonates with anyone, that we need to do more work in this space.
My input is, yes, additional information will help. I know Rita, as our coordinator, has been in touch with many service organizations out there in our sister cities and getting feedback and report. Is that correct, Rita?
I'm sorry. So sorry. I feel like Can you repeat that, please, Dan? I beg your pardon.
You have the pulse on things currently, right? As far as needs go. At least the feedback we can get.
Okay. Yeah. Right. So we're getting feedback from nonprofits, and we're getting reporting, but more than that, we're getting some anecdotal information. Just a quick FYI for you guys, and I didn't mention this in my report. The city is actually going to be sending out a resource postcard that's going to hit every mailbox in Sammamish, and it's translated in Hindi and Mandarin, as well as English and Spanish. And those three languages plus English, and they have all the like food insecurity, like general questions on COVID, LifeWire. It's a real kind of like, 5 like different numbers that they can call. And then also the city is funding 4,000 Nourishing Networks cards that we do in conjunction with Issaquah. So we are going to get that printed and give it out to the food banks and other providers to distribute to any clients that are in need.
I'd like to ask
Rita,
a question.
Do you know if that card... Yes, CJ, go ahead.
I'd like to ask a question with the amount of work and the amount of need that has all of a sudden shown up. Do we really have enough staff to respond to what we're seeing around us? My sense is, I would suspect we do not have enough. I suspect that Rita is handling most of the burden, and is not really funded to the level that would really handle the full burden.
CJ, I can appreciate that, and I agree with you, but again, it's up to the city manager to determine staffing levels for city employees.
Well, I think it's up to us to point.
100%.
I think we need to point that out. That if the commission thinks that there's not enough staff to handle the need, particularly with the new need that we have with the virus, that it is up to us to bring to their attention that it's our thinking that there is not enough staff to handle the need. If we get rid of the COVID and that some of that need will drop down, then they could respond to that. But right now, with what's going on, I don't think there's enough staff, period.
I'd like to add to that, from Tom's comment and everyone's comments about, are we reaching the community at this time? We obviously aren't reaching the community, but how do we do that? Mm-hmm. And I've been actually struggling with this question with my own, I have been struggling with this question in my own organization about how do we really reach the communities that really need, that are hurting the most and have the least access to the services that we know are out there. Mm-hmm. And what we did was we partnered with community organizations and community trusted messengers or community connectors, that however you want to call it. And these are folks who are really embedded in communities of color or other or seniors or whoever the groups that we're trying to reach. We're really embedded in the community and paying them to get the word out about the services. And this has been a model that we've been using recently in this time of COVID, where we are seeing that communities of color are really not accessing, like, for example, you've all heard about the PPP loans. These communities were really left out, particularly in that first round, because they didn't have access to the information about it. And so what we did was we hired folks who are already embedded in the community. One of the people we hired was IAWW, because we knew that they have connections in that community, those communities, those small businesses that needed that support. And so I'm kind of thinking out loud that, instead of hiring another staff person like Rita, if what we're really concerned about is outreach about these services, printing up a list of resources in English or even in other languages isn't really enough. That's not the way people get information, is going on a website and finding stuff. It's by word of mouth. It's by case managers who are out in the community who have relationships. It's all relational. And so it's perhaps something we want to think about suggesting to the council or through our grant, or putting some money aside from our grants to pay organizations and community connectors who are already in the community, who are really embedded in those communities. And again, it could be seniors, it could be IAWW for the East Asian community on the East Side. It could be, there's several Latino organizations or community connectors on the East Side who are well connected to the Latinx community, and have them make sure that get them up to date, do trainings with them about all the stuff that we all the services we're paying for that are available, domestic violence, the food and all of that, have them make sure that their communities get access to this information. It's just an idea, but that's the model we've been using, and it's been pretty successful.
Jody, I like that idea. I think that sounds like it makes a lot of sense, because it could pick up the need while there is a need, and at some point we hope that the need is going to go back down.
Yeah, and those relationships that we build as a city with those folks will continue. If we continue to engage them, then as more information comes out in the future, they'll know about the city and all the things that we do and all the organizations we support, and they can continue to develop those, get the word out. So, but I think it's really important that we pay them. We can't just expect, IAWW's out in the community, so let's just have them do it for us. We can't do that. It's not a viable, or it's not a sustainable model.
No. And with the public benefits or government benefits that are available, it's not just a matter of lack of awareness. It's also that, and I'm specifically now talking about, Asian businesses that are often family businesses, that they are sole proprietors, because of which they're often not eligible for some of these benefits that are available. So there's probably some need for advocacy that, some of the legal aid organizations that we work with, if they do some advocacy, advocating for family-owned businesses, or, those types of businesses run by immigrants that are not likely to benefit from some of the government aid that is available.
Mhm. Well, and I love what.
So sorry, Tom, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to link it a little bit to what Stan, you suggested, but I love the idea of finding a way to go deeper into the community through the relationships, it's about trust. And if someone is really struggling, they're going to turn to their closest confidants rather than want to go public. So if there's a way of activating the community in some way, I think that could be super powerful. To CJ's point, it could be one of those where when over time you may not need it, and then linking it to Stan's suggestion that we all reflect a little more deeply on this conversation, and we send in our ideas, and then we find a way to kind of pull it all together, and then as a group decide if we want to bring some of this forward to council or not. But I love the dynamic and the idea of we're trying to make an impact here.
I appreciate that. Rita, question to you and Mike. Is there a way that we could contact groups and be able to pay them for community outreach? Is there a way that the city would fund that? I don't mean to put you on the spot.
Well, this is a very interesting scenario. I'm very aware of trusted community connectors. And I think we have those relationships already. I know within Human Services, because we really try and make sure that we are connected to different groups, even groups that we don't fund. So, for instance, Mary Queen of Peace has a big Latino group that meets weekly. So we have connections with groups other than the ones that we fund as well. As far as precedents of whether we could pay them, I mean, I could look into that. This is new, but I'm not coming from a place of no. I'm sure there could be a way, and we can look into it and get back to you at the next meeting for sure.
I appreciate it. What I'm looking at is how we, as a commission, can recommend better community outreach and awareness. It's the communication thing that we've talked about before, making the community aware of what is available to them to help fill some of their needs. Be it, everything from sexual assault, domestic abuse. There's a lot of people that don't even know about the food bank, and that it's non-judgmental if you have to go to the food bank. So I'd like to find a way to be able to get some funding to increase awareness and find a way to increase awareness. That's going to be one thing on my list, I guess.
I love that. And I would say now's the time too. I know, Rita, I'd rather, if we're going to do something, we got to do it soon.
Yeah.
I agree. Can we
Hi,
move on with our...
Terry?
Oh, hi. Yeah.
Terry, you there?
He's back.
Oh, I'm
We
there.
can.
Yeah.
Do you have any
I've been
input
listening
on this?
I've been listening into all of this, so I haven't missed anything. And Mike has been very helpful, so I'm back. So.
Do you have any input on this?
My only thought was that I know that there isn't a public safety commission like this, but I understand that there's a public safety committee of the council. And I don't know, my thought would be if we as the Human Services Commission was to encourage the Public Safety Committee to be proactive in reviewing training of the officers that are serving the Sammamish community. That's just a thought I had.
I think educating our first responders on what is available would be a big plus. I think that's a good first step. I don't know how aware they are of what's available. Maybe we work on some kind of flyer presentation or just sitting down and talking to them and let them know what is aware. Maybe we sit down with the chief and say, Chief, this is what we can do. Here's how we can help. And here's what's available. So if you have to respond or have any interaction with anybody in the city, you can know where to turn.
Love that.
I know we did it with the King County Vets program, and it was a big payoff. So
Nice.
First responders are usually the first touch with people who do have needs. All right. I would like to keep things going because I don't want time to get away from us. There is a few things we need to make sure we do. We can always touch back if we need to. I would like to move on to the overall presentation of the Human Services Grant Program. Is that Rita or Mike?
Dave. Chair, this is Mike. I just wanted to introduce our interim city manager, Dave Rudat. He's been here in the council chambers with Rita and I, kind of listening in on the conversation. And before we jump into our PowerPoint, he'd just like to say a few quick things about the grant review process. So I'll turn it over to him.
Good evening, Commission. I just wanted to say hello, introduce myself. You know, when I got here, COVID took over, and I've been unable to meet personally many of the commissioners and people who volunteer their time. So I wanted to acknowledge the importance of your work, the commitments that you've made to the community, and the assistance to the City Council in supporting and facilitating their mission goals and objectives in serving the community. You're very dedicated, compassionate volunteers, and as such, I see yourselves as essential in trying to solve the many problems. And listening to the dialogue tonight, I know I'm not wrong. It's been very informative, and I appreciate it. So I look forward to one day soon meeting each of you, and just wanted to say thank you. And thank you to both Rita and Mike for the work they're doing and helping me help the City Council. So I'll turn it back over to Mike, who will give you an overview of the Human Services Grant Program. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
sir.
Dave. All right, I'm going to pull up the PowerPoint that we are presenting for the next few items on our agenda, and this will probably look pretty familiar. We actually went through this back in 2018 when the Commission first went through the grant review process. I'll have Rita lead the presentation, and feel free to interject if there are any questions or comments as we go. Rita?
There you go. All right, so let's rock and roll. So we are going to be talking and giving an overview of the Human Services Grant Program. Mike, which one is it? Is this one? This one here. Look at this. I'm such a technophobe. Okay. All right. So the purpose of this presentation is just to give you, I know most of you are familiar. Terry, I know you're not. So if you have any questions, you can ask me at any point. So we're just going to give you an overview of the program, our process of how we assess grants, look at the score sheet, and then look at the grant review assignments. Those are the small subgroups, and the next steps from there. So let's talk about the grant program background first of all. So as you know, the grant program has grown from 2 grant recipients to 30 recipients. It started in 2001, and initially our city clerk, Melanie Anderson, was allocating grants. Whenever the people applied for grants, she would allocate. So the application process happens every 2 years, and this aligns with the city's biennial budget cycle. And we also partner with a whole host of other cities through a consortium to manage one online grant application process. So instead of a provider applying to 12 different cities, they have one application and they just check which cities they want to apply for to try and sort of alleviate the stress on nonprofits. And then as cities, we independently provide funding to those organizations as we see fit. So the 2019-2020 grant process, that was the first grant review process. So this time, 2 years ago, the Human Services Commission was formed, and that was one of their first assignments. So the process we used was that commissioners were put into subgroups, and there were 3 different subgroups, and they deep dived into certain focus areas. Commissioners assessed applications independently using a scorecard and then deliberated with the subgroup. So the scorecard was kind of, in a way, just a sort of, we didn't really care about the score or the scorecard. It was just a good way of filtering out, maybe weeding out what you didn't want, and just sort of a good way to assess the applications. So then after commissioners assessed independently, they got together with a subgroup, and then they had lots of discussions back and forth. And that's when I would come join you guys and just, if you had any questions, just help you answer any questions. And then those subgroups would present the recommendations to the commission. And then, as you remember, the commission discussed and deliberated. It was quite fabulous because the number that you wanted to fund and the number that we had to fund, we had to try and get down to it. So it was great to watch you guys in action. And then you developed and presented a final recommendation to council. So this is just like a flow chart. So just, just explaining the process on a high level. Application submitted, commission reviews, discussion, debate, you vote on it, and then the recommendation goes to council. And so the 2019-2020 funding allocation, as you can see, basic needs and mental wellness were, the highest ones. 39% and 38% was allocated of funding. So that's where our funds went in the way of allocation, and we have dollar amounts there next to each. And then these were the grant recipients. As you can see, there was a whole host of different organizations covering many different facets. So we had a lot more apply, but these were the ones that the commission decided would be awarded funding. And then just so you know, so once we decide to allocate funding to an organization, we have to do as staff our due diligence. So we have to have reporting requirements. So every organization has to provide quarterly reporting. And at the end of the year, they also provide us demographic information. So that demographic information is interesting because you have a breakdown of not just the numbers of Sammamish residents that were served, but their age, gender, race, demographic, all the deep dives. So then we get that at the end of the year. But every quarter we get reporting on service units. And then we also conduct monitoring visits every 2 to 3 years. This is where I'll go into an agency and spend like 3 or 4 hours just really looking at their processes and making sure that they're following all protocol. And I just want you guys to be aware that this process and these reporting requirements is the same for an organization that we give $1,000 to or $30,000 to. It's public service money, it's public dollars, and so we have to do our due diligence to all organizations, no matter how small or large the amount that we give. So looking forward into the new grant cycle. So we had 66 programs applied for funding, and the total funding request is a whopping $787,000 and some change. That's over $200,000 extra for requests than the last grant cycle. And we're assuming the city budget is $325,445, and that's based on the allocation that was given out 2 years ago. So that's a lot of deliberation for you all. So, we definitely got more of an ask this go round. Our hope is to get the grant recommendation finalized in August. I know that's a big lift for you guys as commissioners, but we're trying to get the recommendation before City Council in September. So looking at the requests that we've had coming in, as you can see, mental wellness and basic needs, they're the top two, followed by domestic violence, seniors, and cultural inclusion. So these are the funding requests that we currently have come in according to those 5 areas. So do you have any questions so far in this PowerPoint?
I do, Rita.
Of course.
My question would be, out of the new requests that we have, I know we're going to go over the grant review criteria in a minute, but should we take into consideration, or do you think it would be beneficial if, when we are doing the review, that we also come up with a secondary figure just in case they may allocate additional funds, kind of like we did last go around?
Well, that's really up to you guys as commission. I mean, I think the magic number is at $325,000, and we should just assume that that's what will be allocated. I don't have a magic ball or like to look in and see. My sense is that that's the number. But as a commission, if you want to do an additional request, that's up to you guys as commissioners. But the $325,000 is the number that you should be aiming for.
But our
Bless you.
$150,000 mental wellness, now that's going to run out in December. Can we add that back in or assume to add that back in?
So with the team mental wellness RFP money, that was a one-off allocation that ends at the end of the year. That doesn't carry on into next year.
I know that. That's why I'm suggesting that we assume that we can push that forward again.
That's, as I say, that's up to you guys as commissioners.
Also,
What seemed to
in the
work-
review process, oh, I'm sorry, Tom. What I
Go
wanted
ahead.
to say was in the review process, when we do start looking at this, remember these grant requests were submitted prior to the major impact of Corona. So the need will probably, honest need will be higher than what they presented. I think that's a safe assumption.
Yes, so the application deadline was actually extended by a month because of COVID, because we knew that, providers had a lot of demands on their time, but pretty much like going through all those grants, they really seem to be like pre-COVID applications that they would have written anyway. Yeah.
Rita, do you have,
Tom.
excuse me,
Tom was next.
CJ,
I'm
sorry.
sorry, CJ.
Rita, do you have or have you given us to it already the budget from last year and how much those organizations have been paid to date, or has that all been paid out to date?
So according to last year, we paid all the organizations. We had actually 21,500 that hadn't been allocated. And as you recall in the update, that was the money that the council gave towards a COVID emergency funding. So they doubled that 21,500 and they allocated that to those 4 providers for emergency COVID funding. And the reasons for us not paying out was because the providers did not fulfill their service units.
Has the city council discussed at all where they're going with the budget and where they're thinking they're going to be able to get to, seeing that there's much more need now than before, or are they just saying this is the need, this is what they get, and that's it?
So are you talking about the funding allocation for the grant cycle? My understanding is that that's the number and it won't change. As far as, does that answer your question, CJ, or?
Well, tell me again, how much have they said they would like to put in the budget for us at this
CJ,
point?
so they haven't had, this is Mike, they haven't had those discussions yet. Those are upcoming to talk about the budget. But when the city manager is, if we don't receive specific direction, for example, if the council doesn't give us direction that, we want to see $400,000 in the human services grant line item, then our assumption is that without that specific guidance, to say differently, that we continue with what we received in the 1920 budget. So when the city manager is assembling his budget, we carry forward that 325 over the next 2 years. And then as the council is having those budget deliberations in the fall, then they may decide, we want to up this money or we want to decrease it or whatever their pleasure might be. But so far we have not received, they haven't had any discussion and staff haven't received any guidance as far as the baseline human services grant program.
Are they going to try to get into this discussion since it's so different than it was in the last biennium? Or they're just going to leave it where it is and see how it falls?
We have no way of knowing, CJ.
So right now, they're kind of doing that in a sense because they're looking at, like Rita was mentioning in her report, all of the data from nonprofits and trying to figure out, where does the true need in Sammamish lie as far as COVID goes. So they're sort of going through a separate process that's focused on the COVID impact and trying to mitigate some of that and fund providers who are working in that area. So that's where their focus has been recently. They haven't really had a chance to discuss that baseline grant program, the non-emergency grants.
So on the list that we got, the 2021, 2022 Human Service Grant applications, there's a requested column on the page that we have. That has come from all the potential grantees?
Correct. So
Correct.
that's all 66 applications that we received add up to that number there.
787, 588.
Correct.
And the city is, and are you saying then that the city is saying, but really they're thinking we only have 325? I'm not very clear how this is all falling out.
So 325 was the same thing they
Go ahead,
granted
Tom.
us. So 325 was the number they granted us after the last cycle. We actually made a request to get more money. I think it was originally 250 or 255, and they were willing to go higher. So what I'm hearing is, barring any new information, assume that's the starting point. But what worked really well last time was we respected the number. We came in and we said, here is what the priority focus would be for that number, but here's what we believe we should be funding and why. And they supported us last time. Don't know if they would be up for that now, but my instincts are, rather than ask for more specific money now, I think we just do the due diligence and come back with a recommendation, but break it into, if we only had that much money, here's what we do, but we really request this much. Does that make sense?
I hear what you say. I'd have to think about that.
Okay. So we're basically following the same procedure that we followed last time around, where we evaluate everything and we say, here's our baseline number, 325, 445, that's available. We allocate those funds via the request, and then we come up with a potential second number to make sure we're meeting the needs.
That would be my sense.
What was the
I have a
cutoff
question.
for those requested numbers to be turned in by the grantees?
So for the application deadline, that was actually in May. Originally, it was at the beginning of April. So there was like a 5-week extension to providers. Oh, the money cut off. Oh, no, there's no limit. So, we don't have a limit to how much. There was a $10,000 originally, like a number of years ago, there was a $10,000 cap, but the last grant cycle, that was lifted.
Correct.
I'm still not clear.
So,
The requested number was turned in May, or when was that turned into the city?
When did the grant request cycle end?
So for the applications, they all came in in May. Yes.
Can you tell me a little closer than just?
We collated all the information and put it on a spreadsheet.
Where about in May though? Because there's a lot that happened in a month.
Oh, of course. So they came, the deadline was the first week of May, and then it took several weeks for the applications to be downloaded into PDFs and for cities to be able to access it.
So there's no consideration being given in the process for what happened between May or the middle of May and where we are now. Is that correct?
So if you're referring to, like the whole COVID situation, sort of as I said, reading through the applications, I think most of the providers were giving applications that they would have done pre-COVID. They just had the extra time because of the stress that they had providing services during COVID. Does that answer your question, CJ? Maybe I'm missing the mark. I'm sorry.
Well, it's not too clear. Maybe I just need to think about it a little more.
Of course.
Okay.
Yep. Anytime. Yeah. Sure.
Thank you. Tom, did you have anything else that you were going to address?
No, thank you though. No, I'm good.
Okay, thank you. Mike, I do have a question. Has the city indicated on the next round of CARES money, and are they going to get us involved in allocation?
Good question.
To my knowledge, that hasn't been determined yet. We have an internal staff committee that's kind of trying to figure out what are our internal city needs as far as keeping staff safe, providing PPE, and all of that. And part of that consideration is the potential for granting money to both nonprofits, but as well as small business owners who might be affected. So I think everything's on the table right now. We're just in the process of kind of narrowing that down. And I can't say for certain what the process looks like, but if it did come down to human services grants, I'd say there's, a good possibility that the commission might be looped in by the council.
Okay, I appreciate that. I'd like to keep things moving because we're getting a little tight on time, and I'd rather not to extend if I could. Is there anything else on the grant program so far? Anybody have input? Okay.
How about some deadlines? I think we're going to be asked to be breaking up as we did before. And what kind of deadlines are you thinking for us to get the hard copies so we can read the grants and then have the time to kind of go through them?
We're going to go over that in the next couple steps, CJ.
Okay.
We're gonna look at the breakdown of who's willing to work in what groups. We're going to look at the score sheet, and we're going to set up a calendar to be able to work off of. So Mike and Rita worked on that side of it for us. I'd like to go to the review criteria.
Okay. All right. So moving along, look at that lovely picture of City Hall at sundown. Okay. So tonight we're going to assign commissioners to subgroups. As you remember, you gave me like your allocations and preferences. And we after tomorrow morning we'll provide all the applications electronically. So we put all the applications into a Dropbox, divided into all those 5 areas of need. And for whichever commissioners need hard copies, we're happy to print those off and drop those off to you. So when you get those applications, you can either do it electronically, or if you prefer a hard copy, we can print them. You'll use a score sheet that you can see here. And again, this is a first touch. This score sheet is like, it's not necessarily the number you allocate. It's just a first touch and a good opportunity for you to assess the applications based on the actual application form. And then after you go through the score sheet, you're then going to meet with your subgroup members and discuss. And then I will be there just to provide answer any questions, provide some historical context, give you some sense of, how they performed in the past. And then you will compile a recommendation. And that's a subgroup. So the subgroup compiles a recommendation. Then they present the recommendation to the full commission. And again, no actions taken. You're just discussing and, presenting the commission your findings. And then once all the subgroups have presented, it's pretty fun. Mike will produce this summary sheet showing the total commission request and available funding. And then in real time, if the recommendation exceeds budget, which I think maybe it will, but I don't know, you may come in under, then we kind of do this great thing of real time, discussion and then reallocation and, deleting this and adding this. And so we try and adjust the funding until we hit the magic number of 325,445. So that would be once all the subgroups have done their recommendations, and then you come together and then you try and come up with a final recommendation. So do we have any questions so far on that?
Well, our subgroups, if we don't change what phase we're in, the subgroups are probably going to have virtual get-togethers. So
yes,
it's do your evaluations of the ones that belong to you, and then let's do a virtual get-together in the subgroup, and then decide who's going to present it to the committee as a whole from that subgroup.
Yeah, and then the whole group can present. Yeah. Yeah.
It'll be very similar to what we did last time, except virtual.
Yeah, and staff are available like whenever you guys meet, so we can make sure we're there. Any other questions on that so far?
This is Terry.
Okay.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes,
So what's the process for determining at least on a percentage basis, how the 325 is divided up amongst the various priority areas?
That's up to the commission.
it's totally up to us based on when we evaluate and do the review process.
So Terry, what happened last time was the first cut, each subgroup came back, many of them came back and said, here's what we believe should be funded, and here are ones that for any number of reasons we don't recommend funding. Then that was all combined, all the subgroups, and the number ended up being higher than we were budgeted to spend. So the first cut was you kicked out a certain amount, and the subgroup only recommends to the total commission. The commission does have to agree on. And then what
Right.
happens is you start debating much more deeply once you get to that's almost that starting number, and that's where the dialogue comes in.
Okay, I got it.
Okay, great.
All right, I'm going to move along. So,
Let's go to assignments. You did Survey Monkey?
all right. So this is about the score sheet. Again, just to use to initially filter. And this was developed by the Commission in 2018, and it also aligns with the needs assessment. And there's evaluation in these 5 key areas: Sammamish needs, system coordination, accessibility, service units and outcomes, and budget. And then there's also different weight to the different areas. So as you can see, Sammamish needs has the highest weighting of that scorecard. And here we have the different areas and the weighting. And then we have discussion. So following the discussion, you adopt a score sheet. Okay, yeah, so this is about the score sheet. So if you want to make any changes, we can revise it to you guys and send you guys a final version by the end of the week. Again, this is just a first touch, a tool just used to filter the applications. So if you want to just take a look at the score sheet and see if you'd like to make any changes.
Does anybody want to put some sort of weighting in there if somebody because of the COVID virus?
Jody, we couldn't hear you.
CJ, can you repeat that? You kind of went out a little bit.
He wanted to know if we want to add any type of rating for the COVID virus. I think that'd be difficult to do because I don't know what the need of the different organizations are. I think we can take it into consideration in our evaluation, but I'm not sure if we add a weighted area. It's up to the committee as a whole.
I have a question. I'm sorry, I don't recall the RFP questions, but are these all of these buckets and questions reflective of the questions that we asked in the RFP? And I'm sorry if that's a elementary question. Not my brain's really tired right now. It's been a long day.
I could see you yawning.
So that reflects the application, Jody. Yeah.
Okay, so if we add anything to this, I mean, we need to keep in mind then if we change this at all, that it might not be no longer aligned with the RFP. Is that correct? So that's the thing I worry about. Like I was thinking, in light of all of the stuff that's happening now, would we want to give some points for folks, for organizations that are particularly reaching communities of color or the Black community, but that would not be reflective of the RFP and in some ways not be fair because organizations weren't asked to address that.
Mm-hmm.
So similarly,
Well, I think
the same thing.
we may be able to address that when you evaluate the program accessibility?
Yeah. Culturally
Or-
specific language needs.
In
Yeah,
the Sammamish needs, there's the number 2, request based on compelling demonstrated need. So I think you just go deeper and you use that point structure.
But similarly, even on the COVID question, it's like if we add something like that, it's not really fair because they might be addressing COVID stuff, but we didn't ask them to talk about it. So it'd be very difficult to rate an organization.
Yep.
I personally, when I review, I'm going to take that into consideration. Even though it may not be directly addressed in the grant. For example, let's take the food bank. We know there's increased demand in the food bank. We know there's increased demand on the seniors issue. So I'm going to personally take that into consideration on my ratings.
One of the things you might be able to do would be where there's a score summary and you've got different totals there, would be to maybe beef up the totals to get up to a total of 100 rather than 75, realizing that some of those needs are going to be beefed up because that's the need that it is, that's the basic need that they need. I don't know if I'm explaining that, but somehow to go from 75 to as a total to 100 as a total and change the end number.
I can see what you're saying. I think we can address it in our individual comments to the subgroup. It may be easier just to leave the sheet the way it is and make sure we address the issues as to why we came up with the numbers we came up with.
And then to the point of, what's happening societally right now, I think that's where the discernment comes in as we debate the value of these. I'd be surprised if some don't rise up because of the nature of what the group serves. And so that's another place where you can start to put the filter on, which is this group addressing the current situation out there?
I agree.
Yeah.
Is there anything else on the score sheet?
Nope.
So are we on assignments?
I believe so.
Yep, we are just bringing that up. Okay, all right. Okay, so grant review work group assignments. Again, just to reiterate, the needs assessment, we had 5 priority areas that we identified, and our grant review groups are based around these priority areas. And as you all did, thank you very much. You all submitted your areas of interest. So we have the suggested group assignments, and this was based on numbers of grants as well as your preferences as well. So group 1 for cultural inclusion, seniors and domestic violence, that's Commissioners Ellis and Ishioka. Those 3 were the smallest groups of applications, so they were all in one group. Group 2 is mental wellness with Commissioners Gunno and Mir, and that was a fairly large group, and that was the second largest group. And then group 3 for basic needs is Commissioners Hall, Bottenberg and Kaler, and basic needs is our largest area of grants. So those are the group assignments. And so next steps, so we're going to again provide you all the applications electronically. We'll do that tomorrow, and an update, a score sheet as well. And if you can just start reviewing the applications within your areas, your subgroup areas, and then work with your team members. So we'll figure it out. I'm happy to sort of arrange, or we can all be put on an email thread together, so we can work with your team members to schedule a meeting, discuss your findings, and then just keep us apprised so that we can then at least be as a support for you guys, and help, and just ultimately it's you guys discussing it, but we're just there as a resource in case you have any questions.
So are you suggesting that you're going to make available to us this GoToMeeting software so the groups can keep their spacing, or we'll just arrange that when the groups get together and arrange the spacing or the mass?
So my sense is that it will be virtual. You know, I'm sensing that might work best for people. But again, I mean, we could meet in a park and sit 6 feet away, but then, you know, the papers will go flying everywhere. So I'm assuming it will be virtual, CJ. But again, as a subgroup, you can decide. So looking at those group assignments, does anybody have any questions on that?
But when you say virtual, are you saying work with the GoToMeeting software, or go to Zoom, or what do you mean by that?
Anything they want. So you know,
Yes,
I think
go
as a
to-
subgroup, you guys can decide what method or what platform works for you best. So as long as you know we all have that platform, we can discuss that. So as subgroups, you can discuss that.
So Rita, this is Terry. In terms of just a sort of a timing, when is our next commission meeting?
So our next commission meeting is going to be the second Wednesday of July. I had to think about that. July, which is, let me bring it up. So it's a second. It's always the second Wednesday of July, a second Wednesday of the month, Terry, and always at 6:30.
This is an excellent lead-in for our discussion on our meeting calendar.
So the idea
long as
is
everybody-
that at our next meeting, that each subgroup would come with their recommendation.
So we're going to pull up the calendar, Terry. So we don't have all the groups, present in the first meeting, the next meeting in July. So we're going to bring up the calendar for you guys to sort of take a look and see what we have tentatively sort of mapped out.
Oh, this answered my question, if I'd been smart enough to look at this.
I don't know. It's all. We actually didn't send it out, so that's you're completely fine.
Send it to us.
Oh, I feel better.
Yeah.
So it's July 8th, I think, right?
Okay.
Right. So the first group to present would be that Seniors Cultural Inclusion and Domestic Violence group, and that would be 1 month from today on Wednesday, July 8th. And then just because of the timing, obviously COVID cut off a few of our monthly meetings, and we're now having to kind of squeeze this review into a smaller amount of time. What we're proposing are some potential additional meetings, obviously subject to the commissioner schedules. So what we have here is July 8th being the second Wednesday of July. Then 2 weeks later, we have a special meeting, a proposed special meeting on July 22nd, same time. And that would be to review the next batch of applications, which would be mental wellness. So that whole meeting would just be to have that subgroup present the recommendation and to kind of discuss why that group recommended what they did. And then our next regular meeting after July 8th would be August 12th, just a regular meeting. And that would be the final group presenting on basic needs. And this is very similar to what we did during the last round where, if there was time after that presentation, we would then go in and discuss our process for how we get to that final recommendation. We wouldn't quite discuss the final recommendation, but just how we're going to get there. And again, 2 weeks after that regular meeting on the 12th, there'd be a special meeting on the 26th. And that meeting would just be dedicated to performing that deliberation process and getting that recommendation, starting to wrap that up. And then the calendar becomes a little less certain. We're in the process, the City Council is in the process of developing their work plan after coming back from this COVID disruption. So we're thinking sometime in September or potentially early October, we would kind of wrap up the recommendation and then present it to City Council on a date to be determined. So the real bookmark here at the end is obviously Council is deliberating on their budget in the fall. And so we need to present the Commission's recommendation to them before they're, finalizing that. This is an input into their budget. So that's we're bookmarked by COVID on one end and the budget process on the other end, and we only have a few months to really get this done. So that's kind of why we proposed what we did. Obviously, we're open to any suggestions or refinements as the Commission sees fit.
I have a question for the group. The subgroup for seniors, cultural inclusion, and domestic violence. Is this going to give you enough time to do a review between now and the 8th and have a presentation to the group?
Can I just quickly interject to give you an idea of numbers of applications? So that first group, domestic violence, seniors, and cultural inclusion, has 17 applications. The next one, the mental wellness group, has 19, and then the basic needs group has 30. That might guide you.
That's fine. I just want to make sure it was enough time for you guys.
I think we can do it, right, Tom?
I know we can do it.
We can do it.
Okay, I feel good.
We'll burn the midnight oil.
You got it.
Him, gang.
Well, I know
You got it.
I may need some mental health counseling after looking at all the mental wellness. I remember how bad it was reading all the grants.
I have a
Very
question.
tedious.
Do we always make the list of all of the applications and the amounts public? Because it's linked to the agenda, and the agenda is public, right?
Yes, everything's public. Yep.
We make that list even before we select public.
The only
That's
thing
just the
is-
application. That's just the stuff that we got from applications. That was just taken off applications.
Yeah, I know.
So it's not. Yeah. So yeah, it's public record. Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Any questions on the meeting calendar? Any changes or comments?
I have one more question. The TBD, the first TBD that follows August 26th, wouldn't that just be September 9th? Or is that because you think we might have to change that September? As I have September 9th on my calendar. So I'm just wondering, are you thinking we wouldn't meet September 9th? Or are you thinking we will meet September 9th and there'll be another date or something?
Sorry, it's a little bit confusing. One thing I'm not sure about is the date of the council recommendation right now. So depending on how that work plan kind of irons out, and I'm going to try and get us on the calendar for later in the year so we have a little bit more time. Hopefully like the first meeting in October, if it's possible, the first council meeting in October. But there is a potential that for example, we have to present at the first or second council meeting in September, at which point that TBD commission meeting, we may not even be able to hold it. So it's a little fuzzy around that time period, and I didn't want to make any promises.
Yep, that's fine.
Yeah, that part of the schedule is going to be dependent on the council, their availability too. Well, is there anything else that we need to discuss?
Just, Rita, I would love to request the hard copy. I got some work to do. I would love to request hard copies of the applications that I've been assigned to.
Of course. I can drop them off as well. When I come in, I'm going to drop them off with Joyce and CJ. Who else wants? Would you like some, Jody?
I want hard copies. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, right. Anyone else? Okay. Terry, would you like some hard copies of your area of the applications?
Yeah, I'd like hard copies, and I can just swing by and pick them up at City Hall.
But City Hall's closed, though, Terry.
Oh, you're closed.
Yeah,
okay.
There you go. It's but no, we'll figure out a way to get them to
We'll
you.
figure out a way we can get them to me. Yeah, fair enough. Thank you.
Chocolate.
Can we load them in on the Dropbox like last time?
Yeah. Just put some used $10 notes in there for me, and yeah.
No. Can we put them in the Dropbox like we did last time as well?
Stan, you're referring to the electronic applications?
Correct.
Yes. So Rita's already actually put them into Dropbox and organized them into the priority areas. So all commissioners will receive every application through the Dropbox. So you won't just be able to see the applications in your priority area, but also every application that we've received.
And
But we're
sending
also going to receive hard copy, aren't we?
Yes, you are, CJ.
Okay.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah.
I just didn't see email saying it was downloaded in the Dropbox yet.
Yeah, no, we're going to give you access to that tomorrow morning, but it's all ready to go.
Thank you. Thank you. I guess my weekend's planned out for me now.
It might be
Is there any other
raining, so it's a
business?
good one.
Oh, okay. Any other business?
Okay, good.
I think everything went well. It's all virtual. We got a good record. We're on our way. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Anybody second it?
I
Thank
second.
you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, aye, aye. Great. Anybody opposed? I didn't think so. Have a great night, guys, and thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Thanks,
Good night,
Steve.
guys.
Thank you, folks. Have a lovely evening.
Take care.
Okay. Night, guys.
Good night.